So, a question for you. Is vulnerability an actual strength or is it a weakness? That's going to be the topic of this video this week. Vulnerability. And you may have heard of a very famous TED Talk speaker. Her name's Brené Brown. If you've not heard of her, I'd highly recommend you go and check her out on TED Talks. Just type in Brené Brown, vulnerability, and her talk will come up. It's been viewed, quite literally 5, 10, 15 million times, I think now. It's one of the most viewed talks on the TED Talk platform. And she talks about the power of vulnerability. Well, I want to come at it from a weight loss point of view in this week's training. And just talk about it a little bit and how I have seen vulnerability either work for people or not work for them. And there's a perception that if you're vulnerable, you are weak and frail and just not capable of achieving because you're vulnerable. Well, I see it a little bit differently from that in the weight loss space. And here's how I see it myself and how I've seen it play out over the years. With the people I've worked with, predominantly females, but some males as well over the last decade, but predominantly females, busy professional women, typically over the age of 40. What I've found is the ones who put up that wall of defense, and I understand why people do that, and I'll explain why I think they do it in a moment, but when they put up that wall of defense, that barrier that they can do everything, they're capable, and they know what to do, those are the women that I've found over the years of being the ones who find it the most difficult to take the weight off. Not because they're not intelligent, not because they're not motivated, not because they don't know what to do. It's just that there are certain things they don't know how to do that well. Like all of us, we can't all know everything. And those little things they don't quite know how to do well, they kind of mask that with this sense of, okay, put the wall up, I do know everything. And as a consequence of that, they don't quite get the results they want. Now, why do they do that? Well, because there's a perception that if you are seen to be vulnerable or weak or not knowing something, then you're going to be thought less of by other people. But as Brené Brown points out, if you listen to her talk, actually, in order to move forwards, there needs to be a degree of vulnerability, because from that place of vulnerability, which can be perceived as a weakness, that's where you also start to learn and you start to grow. So for the women that I have worked with who have allowed themselves, and it's not always an instant thing to become vulnerable. I want to say vulnerable, I don't mean they just become all, pathetic and weak and I don't know what to do and throw the shoulders up in the air and the hands out. I'm talking about when they say, okay, this aspect of weight loss, be it something to do with the way they think, something to do with nutrition or exercise, I'm simply not clear on this. I simply don't know what I should be doing here, or I've tried this particular thing and I've tried it over and over again, it just hasn't worked for me, I really am struggling with this, or finding it a challenge, or it's just difficult. What do you think? Can we have a conversation around this? When somebody adopts that sort of a mindset, they're in a position now where they can learn the information that they need in order to grow, develop and move to the next level. And that requires you to be a little bit vulnerable. But here's the thing, and why people are reluctant to do this, because they have been vulnerable in the past, shown their, for want of a better term phrase, their soft underbelly, and they've been disappointed, let down, or they've been misguided, and as a consequence of that, they've not got the results they want. So they have a defense mechanism now where if somebody's trying to help them, they get defensive and they can close down and throw that wall up and not get the help they need. So I'll just ask you to think about this vulnerability and this ability to open up when working with somebody on your weight loss, whether that's with me or somebody you're currently working with. The more vulnerable you can be, and I don't mean you become pathetic, but the more you can open up and discuss situations, the far more helpful that person can be for you. Because look, weight loss I've found over the years now, it's not just about food and exercise. Yes, those things, we need to get them right more often than not, the right sort of food combinations, the right type of exercise to get the results we're looking for. But it's all of the other factors that come into play that surround those two elements that affect how we eat, how we move. And it's those things that need to be discussed sometimes, because until we're prepared to discuss those things, it's very difficult to move on. And one of the things I recommend to all of the people I work with, all of the women I work with, is when they start to work with me, don't tell anybody else what you're doing. Keep it as quiet as you possibly can. Only really be sharing what you're doing with, in my opinion, either your nearest and dearest and the person you're working with directly, because they've got your best interests at heart. When you start to open up to everybody and anybody, you could be exposing yourself and your vulnerabilities to people either A, don't really care, and as a consequence of that, that can make you feel kind of bad. You know, the fact that you're opening up to them and they've got no interest, that's not a good feeling. Or B, they become envious of the fact that you are trying to take your health a bit more seriously and you are trying to lose weight, and they can start to sabotage you because they're a little bit jealous of what you're doing, and you're making them feel bad because they're not taking action. So you just need to be careful of who you actually open up to. But yeah, I'd like to think about this whole idea of being vulnerable, what that means to you. Is it something that you have struggled with in the past? Have you struggled to really open up and explain and describe and talk about your feelings around health and well-being? And have you always thrown that wall up? And maybe it's time now to, maybe just have a little look over that wall and maybe lower your defenses a little bit, and maybe allow the right sort of person to come in to guide you on this path to better health and well-being. So that's all I wanted to share with you this week, was just this idea of vulnerability and some of my thoughts around it. But again, for some more in-depth ideas around this vulnerability, do check out Brené Brown's TED Talk. Again, go to TED Talks, Brené Brown, The Power of Vulnerability. It's a 15-minute talk. It's very humorous but very insightful. And in addition to what you've heard here today, it may just help you to move to that next level when it comes to either getting started with your weight loss, or if indeed you've started already, just how to maintain the momentum and keep yourself moving forwards. So until the next training insight video like this one, take very good care, and bye for now.